It's really difficult to me when I see that there's somebody that is wrong on the internet, which is why I don't sleep that often. Because there's a lot of people, especially as it pertains to Michigan football, that are wrong on the internet quite a bit. Let's count CBS Sports among them, although it is just a prediction. I thought it was a bad prediction about how the 2025 season will go for Michigan football. Let's talk about that, as well as the offensive and defensive line on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I was on the ground in Ann Arbor again today, and we are going to talk more about meeting with Grant Newsome and Lou Esposito later, because I thought it was like a treasure trove of information to some degree. So we'll get to that, but I want to get to Tom Fornelli, who I love and respect. I've met him in person, and I've told him how much I respect him generally. I don't really like his take, and this was from last week, a week ago tomorrow. I just saw it yesterday. His too early Big Ten over-under predictions, and it said like, Ohio State and Oregon or whatever, something like that. And but yeah, I thought, okay, well, he's going to see what we've been seeing as far as Michigan, the schedule, all of these things. I know the schedule has some negative elements to it. You'd love more home games, but it isn't. It is what it is. But I expected to see something like the over-under at least one game higher, because it's set at 8.5, according to CBS in their own internal what have you. And he had Michigan at under, improving only one game on the season. He has Michigan losing to Oklahoma, Nebraska, USC, and Ohio State. Now, is that possible? Absolutely. Is it probable? I wouldn't think so, right? Because that means that Michigan would just kind of be back into kind of where it was in 2017. You know, and kind of like those years of 2017, 2018, 2019, they're going to win. They're going to win the games that they absolutely should, and they're going to lose the games that they probably should be more competitive in. I don't think that's where they're at, given what we saw at the end of the year this last year. And that he does say that in part that is why he made his decision, right? Is because, you know, hey, I thought they were going to be. I gave them the benefit of the doubt coming off a national championship, and then they fell flat for a lot of the year. Despite having beaten Ohio State and Alabama. But to me, like, that's kind of, and the reason why I wanted to start with this, it part and parcel does it's the same thing that we have said for years on this program, is that other teams are allowed to get better, and Michigan is never afforded that luxury, right? That's the same reason why you see Buckeyes, they have, it can't be just that Michigan has been the better team, or was the better team that given day like last year, but over the course of the last 4 years, it has to be this ultra nefarious plot, and why they have to add on to it and say like there's gambling rings and all the, you know, and there's all this other stuff of like, oh, they had the practice footage and all of these extracurriculars that they have to add into to make themselves feel better about losing 4 straight to Michigan. It cannot just be, I mean, again, you still see people saying sign stealing is like, oh, how did Connor know that there was who the sign stealer was on their side? Because we was Michigan's sign stealer. You idiots. Why can't you? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said idiots. I don't want to call people that. I ask for forgiveness there, but nonetheless, like it's that's the thing is, right. They cannot imagine that Michigan could ever get better without some kind of nefarious means. Yet, when you look at the makeup of this team plus the schedule, I see a team that, I mean, could it lose 4 games? Yeah, if things don't go well, fall apart. But the defense, what we saw at the end of the year, especially, you would normally, like Penn State coming out of 16-17, playing against USC, but not really back USC, right? USC's not really been back, but like those kind of gave you those end of season Clay Helton, or end of tenure Clay Helton teams kind of made you think, oh, maybe they are back. They're not like Texas, who's been to 2 playoffs. But Penn State, just by virtue of hanging around with USC for 2 years, people are like, oh man, it's going to be good. They lost those games. They lost both of those bowl games, but everyone's like, they're so good. James Franklin's just got this team rolling, and they get this benefit of the doubt every single year. Michigan, however, you would think by the virtue of beating Ohio State and Alabama, especially beating Alabama's A team with Michigan's B team for the most part, you sit there and look at the defense and see what it was able to do at the end of the year under Wink Martindale and say, okay, that's gonna be really good this next year. Because if you looked at just the Ohio State game, you said, okay, yeah, but they lost Josiah and the 2 interior tackles and some of the other players like Amir Hall, who made a big play on that interception, or Quentin Johnson, who was just steady, and Makari Page. And you'd look at that and say, okay, maybe they're going to take a big step back. But in the bowl game, only 2 of those aforementioned players played, Quentin Johnson and Amir Hall. Otherwise, you're returning pretty much everybody. And they held Alabama to 13 points, right? They were excellent there. And then you look offensively, and this is where Tom Fornelli says, we'll see what they get out of Bryce Underwood. Listen, and I don't mean this to impugn the quarterback room from last year. Bryce Underwood could have come in as a junior out of high school with very little knowledge of the Michigan playbook, I think, and probably have helped Michigan's offense be better than it was last year. Like, to act like, well, we'll see what the offense is. The offense is going to be better than it was last year. Because this isn't Iowa. This isn't a situation where you're looking at it and saying, like, Iowa might have fixed their offense. How do you know that? Well, they brought in Cade McNamara. Oh, is Cade like this otherworldly quarterback? No, he was a game manager that helped solidify things in 2021, just made enough plays while Blake Corum, Hassan Haskins, and those around him really kind of did the work. The offensive line did the work, all of that stuff. So it kind of does hinge on some other things, but I think it's misplaced when you say it's on Bryce Underwood. I think it's more offensive line, which we're going to talk about here momentarily. And but I think that the caliber of talent in the room has risen. Now, I am curious about the offensive line. I'm curious about wide receiver, but Michigan's upgraded across the board. So if you just get that offense to some level of respectability and the defense just continues the trajectory it was already on, which it should, then now you're cooking with gas. So to kind of put it like, you look at some of those games, like Michigan's beaten Ohio State 4 years in a row. That should be a benefit of the doubt. They're breaking in a new quarterback too. They're breaking in almost an entirely new defense with a new coordinator as well. It's the issues you're saying that you overlooked with Michigan, you're overlooking with Ohio State right now. And then you look at like USC, like, okay, West Coast trip, maybe that's a problem. But Michigan should be more talented than USC and Nebraska, even though I do have Oklahoma and Nebraska as my two kind of problem games because they're early in the year. And, at least Nebraska has a quarterback returning for year 2. Oklahoma has John Mateer, but still Michigan is more talented than both of those teams at the moment. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to do that. But I kind of look at it as it's more of a 10-2 season. And I understand if you don't want to feel, won't get fooled again, as Roger Daltrey might say. But at the same time, like, look at more of the schedule in terms of home and away, home, away, home, away, home, away, away, home, compared to, I don't know. Like, it's just that I don't know that the offense is going to be better. It's going to be better. They're overhauling it for a reason. All right, let's talk offensive and defensive lines. Really incredible stuff. We'll start with the offensive line and then finish with the defensive line, even though my judgment tells me I should probably do it the other way, but that's how we're going to do it. And we will do that here in just a moment. But before we do, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters. And I mean, there's no more Cinderella stories, so unfortunately, and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on, I still have Florida, I think, is one of my national champions, but it's hard to kind of overlook Auburn at this point. And FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening, we've got the weekend coming up with the Final Four. There's always something to be, something exciting to bet on, rather. And the FanDuel app is easy to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action for the rest of the NCAA tournament. All right, let's let's dig into a little bit of what Grant Newsome and Lou Esposito said. We're going to start with Newsome, probably because the last two articles I wrote were based off of things that he had to say. I think that the mentality is there from him. And like he's, hey, last year was unacceptable. I've taken, you take things in retrospect and you look back. What could we have done better? And one of the things that he identified, this was kind of the talk of the day, was these guys need to have fun, and that's important. Now, it's kind of weird because to me, part of that's like, and Friday is Hawaiian shirt day, like type of thing, but it's at the same time, I don't think he's wrong, because you could see that was part of the culture change in 2021. These teams had fun. 2023, certainly that team had fun. And then you get to kind of the bowl games, 2022 in particular, it didn't really seem like the team was having fun. It was like it put all the pressure on his shoulders and you saw it implode as a result. Whereas, you looked at 2023, you looked at, the Rose Bowl, it really felt like that was a team that was having fun even all week, just because everyone was like, oh, you guys don't want Bama. That's Bama. And they're like, we're just going to have fun and go out there and do our thing. And I think that there is something to that, especially with the line play, the idea of like, it's a fun thing to go out there and move people around. So, I mean, that's part of it. You need the other things. And I think a big part of it too is just the depth, because I was kind of surprised, like this time last year, when I felt a little bit more confident about the offensive line. And granted, we were talking about some names that didn't end up really being factors until at least later in the season, like a Greg Crippen. It was, we weren't talking about Evan Link and we weren't talking about Dom Judice, right? Like we were more like looking at, we were looking at it as Miles Hinton, Josh Preeb, Joel Hottie, and I can't even remember who we were slotting in as the right tackle at that time. It wasn't Evan Link, certainly. And so it was kind of a surprise in that moment. However, I look at it and I say now, and to hear Grant Newsome say, we might be 10 deep right now on the offensive line, I think is pretty impressive that that's where they feel they are. Now, he wouldn't, he was asked, what would the starting five be right now? And he was like, I'm not going to tell you that. I don't know what the harm in that is at the moment, but okay. But he said there are entrenched starters, right? People we say those are guys who aren't going anywhere. You'd have to imagine those are the three returning starters in Evan Link, who he's had a lot of really good things to say about, right? Like he said, he agreed with my assessment that last two games were Evan Link's best. Didn't necessarily grade out that way on PFF, but still, like, you could see it, obviously. Not a lot of sacks going on against Ohio State or Alabama, and switching sides and everything. Held his own against the two of the four best teams, however you want to look at it, that they played. Arguably the best team that they played in Ohio State, considering they won the national championship. And he held his own. Joel Hottie, who you hope is... He said he's practicing at one position. I hope that they moved him back to left guard because he played a lot better there. But maybe he's gotten the hang of right. I don't know. He wouldn't say what position. He just said he's only practicing at one. And then Greg Crippen, you would imagine, is the center. And then from there, he mentioned a bunch of different guys. Now, Nathan Afobe is someone I'd mentioned as a potential tackle. It sounds like he's practicing mostly inside. It sounds like he's taken that step forward. That's good news. Brady Norton, someone that we had considered a project. He's one of the strongest players on the team. He's added some good weight this offseason. You wondered if you go from Cal Poly and lesser competition, if he's going to be able to hang with the big boys, and then he comes in and he's able to go up against our defense and he's holding his own. So that's another interior player who could be a part of it. Andrew Sprague, obviously, is a guy who started last year in the bowl game. So now I just kind of don't know what to think. Is it, you kind of look at it and you think maybe it's something that looks a lot more like Evan Link, Joel Hottie, Greg Crippen, Nathan Afobe or Brady Norton, and Andrew Sprague, and then whoever else ends up working in there. He talked a little bit about Babalola, and I asked him about Ty Haywood. Ty Haywood, he just kind of said that basically, like, hey, we basically got a call saying, like, hey, maybe I'm not as firm to Bama. What's your guys' situation? I know, but it was like, hey, that's a guy that we wanted from the beginning. So that's good. With Babalola, it didn't sound like, he's on pace to being a freshman starter. And that's fine. I think that's absolutely fine, right? Like people that clamor for the 5-star to start just because he's a 5-star, give him some time. It kind of goes into one of the things that Lou Esposito said that I'm going to include here, where he said, like, the thing when I asked him about the second-year players, so I wanted to know more about David Pale and Lou Gardeck-Pai, two somewhat ballyhooed players. I mean, Pale wasn't a high-end player in terms of the ranking, but certainly in terms of the way Michigan saw him. And he said the thing about players like that is you go back and you look at the film, and I'm including this with the offensive line even now, and you sit there and you see a flash and you're like, all right, cool, that's great. But then like the next play, they go left when they're supposed to go right. So that's kind of where it's like, I don't necessarily want to throw Babalola to the Wolves just for the virtue, especially with the, Oklahoma coming up in week 2. You're going to have, Brent Venables calling that defense. I think that the Nebraska defense can be really good as well. So I think it's fine to kind of have this take a minute for them, especially if you can get some guys who have been around in all of that. So I think that's good. And then you've got other guys who have been working cross-training, right? Like Jake Warnera's cross-training center and guard. He could be another option. I think that was really it. So I think that's about 8 players that I mentioned. He says they're 10 deep. I can't recall any others that got like significant mentions, but I think that that's a good thing. And as one of the things that Grant Newsome noted is like, we're aware that this offense is going to go as the offensive line goes. And the good thing is we have a collaborative effort. We have an offensive coordinator in Chip Lindsey that isn't coming in and saying, I want these guys to bend to what I want to do. It's more of how can we maximize the potential of what we have. That's great. That's exactly what you want. So encouraged by that, and likewise encouraged by a bit of what we heard about the defensive line. So let's talk about some of the things that Lou Esposito had to say. We will do that here in just a moment.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, definitely some good stuff coming out on defense. I think the thing is actually something that comes out on offense from defense. Because, of course, Bryce Underwood got mentioned. We weren't going to go a whole press conference without mentioning Bryce Underwood. Are you kidding me? No questions for Grant Newsome about Bryce, but you got it for, coming to Newsome. Or sorry, not Newsome, Esposito. And I thought that it was interesting because it was asked aptly about how the defensive linemen have been commenting about Bryce's legs and how that kind of has made Benny and Derek Moore both were saying like, yeah, okay, he's used his legs, he's fast, and this isn't great for us. We got to figure out how to contain him and all of that type of stuff. And the thing, though, is that despite their complaints, Lou Esposito said, to me, it's not like that's great, but it's more about like his arm. He's like, he's different. He goes out there and it's a different thing. He's precise. He's got a capability that we haven't seen around here. Now, granted, he's been around a year, Lou Esposito has, but he's like, yeah, otherworldly. But where I want to tie this in, and what I thought was equally as interesting, instead of just like, let's heap lavish praise upon Bryce Underwood, is what he said it does for his defensive line. And it isn't all about just the fact that he can run and use his legs in the same way that we heard some of the players mentioned. It's because he's no contact, right? Because the quarterbacks are no contact. I know some people don't love that, but it's the right call. But he said Sharon compared to other coaches will be like, okay, you got close enough and you're good. Because keeping in mind, right, having a proper exegesis of practice is in looking and thinking about what happens when the quarterback, which is the case for every single team across all of college football and spring ball, it being no contact, right? That when that defensive lineman breaks through the line, as long as they break through the line and get in the vicinity, it's like, all right, done, sack or whatever it is. That's not necessarily how Michigan's treating it, because you have to think about the fact that when these guys break through the line, they're going to get whistled immediately when they get close to the quarterback. But the idea that Michigan's using is make sure you have the right body control to get near him still and then stop. And as Esposito says, the importance of that is when you look at games and you see a lot of these instances, and I'm thinking of the Detroit Lions in my head when he says this, the idea that like they broke through the line, they got the quarterback running around or whatever, and they overshoot, they miss, whatever it is, they don't quite get there. And then that makes you sit there and say like, oh man, they were so close. You know, you got that pressure, but didn't get the guy on the ground. And because of the way that they're practicing and treating it, especially with Bryce's mobility, it's the idea that they're having the right body control to be able to actually get in the right position to bring him down. They're just not doing it. Thought that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I didn't write yet about Jayshon Barham. I've got 8 articles up so far on Wolverines Wire, but he talked about Jayshon being the most physical player in college football. And he was noting like he's not in our position group. Just because he might be, rushing from the edge, he's still part of Brian Jean-Marie's group. It's just one word, and he moves up from being in the middle of the field up to the line. And he said, because we have an NFL defense, like one word changes the assignment of somebody. And we want to build this run wall, right? Like that's where it starts. Others aren't necessarily doing that. They're doing these other different things, but everything is kind of built on, we build this run wall, we contain via the edges, and we do all these different things. I think that's really interesting as well. But what is not surprising, but like I think the most exciting and encouraging thing is the depth in the interior for that group. Now he had some things to say about the edges. We'll get to that momentarily, but I think like now you're looking at a situation, and we've kind of talked about this the last few weeks. The depth in the middle is actually kind of insane because you have the 4 guys that rotated against Alabama, and then you add in the 2 transfers. And he's saying like, yeah, it's going to be different to be able to have a situation where you're not necessarily like we wanted to play Mason and Kenneth as much as possible last year, but you got to take them out at some point. Now you have a situation where he said, we basically have 3 sets of starters, and we tell them that like, you're all starters. Because and then it's more about figuring out what's the balance, and then also cross training them with different players. So it's kind of like an offensive line type scenario where you're trying to get guys to gel with each other, to be able to move to different parts, 3 tech, 5 tech. You got the nose there. You got a guy maybe splitting out wide. Maybe you put 3 out there at the same time, and getting them accustomed to playing together with different combinations and do all these things. I just feel like to some degree, this is some 3D chess that is happening with the Michigan defense, because now that Wink Martindale seems to have figured out how to do the college game, right, and work some things out. He acknowledged at the beginning of spring, like, yeah, our 3rd and 8+ was not good, but anything within that was great. If he could figure that out, because that was what killed them all year. That's what killed them against Texas. That's what killed them against some of the other teams that they played. Oregon, like they'd get into those third and longs, MSU. And then you'd find like a 3rd and 15 gets converted seemingly with ease. If they can fix that, have the fresh legs up front, and have it where it's like it's coming in waves, because even though you had Mason and Kenneth in 2023, they were the reserves. They were who they were, but we weren't talking about them like that yet, right? We weren't talking about them the way we were talking about them last year throughout much of 2023, right? It was still Chris Jenkins and Mason Graham, but we weren't talking about them in that sort of way. Now, the edge rotation sounds like, he says it also sounds like it's 6-ish deep, but I mean, 4 guys for sure. I mean, you've got the 2 starters, TJ Guy and Derek Moore, Dom Nichols, Cam Brandt. You love those, that combination. And then it's just the question of how can some of those other guys be a little bit more consistent? Can a Devin Baxter and Lou Esposito, can they be consistent? I don't know. We'll see. But right now, I mean, again, the defensive line to me feels like the strength of the team in general. And now the fact that you've got, I just mentioned 10 guys that are going to be able to, out of a grouping of 4, 10 guys are going to be able to just rotate in and out and do all kinds of things. I think that bodes really well. And he also said some really good things about like how excited they are about Nate Marshall coming in. And I'm not surprised by that whatsoever. So I walked away from that being like, all right, let's go. I think that they're in just such a good position to be able to capitalize this year. And all of this to me flies in the face of kind of how Michigan is perceived outside of the world. Again, normally, like if it was Penn State that beat Ohio State and Alabama to end the year, they would be being, and especially if they brought in Bryce Underwood, they'd be crowned national champion, preseason national champion right away. Right. And when they don't have, I don't think, because they're losing Abdul Carter and some others, they don't have the type of defensive line Michigan has. Michigan has similar, actually a little bit higher of a retention in terms of returning production. And then they have a phenom who has a different skill set than Drew Aller, and certainly could be like pretty astounding. The schedule, like I said, is amenable minus the home away of it all. And it's funny to me that Michigan's not being looked at as a team that should be on the rise, because all indications are that it is, if you look at just kind of the whole picture. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Yeah, we're not going to have the end of year basketball conversation like I planned. At least I don't think so. I think we've kind of passed that up. Unfortunately, with the weekend, how much I had to write and some church obligations, didn't get to the weekend show as I had hoped. Probably any of you could have predicted that. I didn't predict it. But say Libby anyway. We'll be back on Tuesday. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace.